Welcome to the People Strategy Podcast. My name is Traci Austin, and in this show, we dive into the latest trends and best practices in talent management and organizational development. Join me as I chat with industry experts, HR leaders, and business innovators to uncover strategies that can elevate your people and your business. We're very excited today to have Ray Cox with us. Ray will be sharing with us as a part of our strategic partner series, and you heard from Camber last week. So we're going to be talking a little bit about how we've implemented some of the people strategies into the business. This episode is brought to you by Elevated Talent Consulting's Team Retention Program. So do you have leaders in people management roles that are looking to up-level their teams? If so, this is the program that will allow them to start to put some of that infrastructure in place with their team to increase retention. So with that, Ray, thank you so much for joining us on the People Strategy Podcast.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So do you want to share a little bit with us about your background and your journey of co-founding Highfill?
Sure. Highfill we're a small engineering consulting firm in the water space in North and South Carolina. So the journey started probably a little over 20 years ago. I was working for a regional firm and was getting pretty frustrated with the lack of training and support that I felt like I had available to me. I noticed that an engineer whom I respected very much, Tyler Highfill, had founded his own company, and I kind of made a mental note of that. And fast forward about a year, and Tyler reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, I have more than I can say grace over. Would you like to consider a partnership?" And so we hashed that out. My wife and I took out a second mortgage and haven't looked back. It's been the best business decision that I've made. And so we set out. And when I learned that Tyler, he had been working for a much larger national firm, and he had kind of estimated, as engineers do, that he was spending more than 60% of his time basically sending metrics up the line, things that weren't making a bit of difference to the clients, things that were just creating stress for him and his team. And so he wanted to really, he felt like there's a better way. We needed to find a way to invest this effort into our clients, into taking care of our people, and not into pushing metrics up the line for bean counters, basically. And so that turned out to be a really good fit for me. And we set out to try to build this company that was going to focus on clients and people and not be bottom line focused. And we've held true to that.
Isn't it amazing where we put our intention tends to not only hit that on clients and people, but yet, the bottom line tends to surprise us even more than what we thought was possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm all for profit. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not anti-profit. I think there are things that are more important to take care of first. And when you do take care of those things, the profit tends to take care of itself.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I meant was like, hey, when we take care of our people and our clients, number one, and are focused on that profit piece, we know that it's going to come because of the value that we are providing. And I just want to name that because it seems backwards at times. And I think so many of us left those big corporate positions because it's like, wait a second, we're not really doing the thing that I was hired to do that I'm passionate about. So how do we shift that?
Right. Yeah, completely agree with that.
And throughout this time, you've shifted from an engineer role, and I know you're really not doing much of that anymore, into, some marketing, some business development type of things. So tell us a little bit about that journey for you and some of those growing pains in the process.
Yeah. Well, Tyler and I both were what we call seller doers in the engineering consulting world, that we're doing complex infrastructure projects. So our clients are all relational clients, not transactional clients. I mean, we're not selling a pair of shoes that someone can return if they decide, I don't really like these, so they're entrusting us with millions of dollars of infrastructure, sometimes millions of dollars in fee. And so we first have to do the work to build trust with those clients before they're going to hire us and sign a contract with us. So he and I were both accustomed to going out, building those relationships, mining the work, booking the contract, setting the team up, and then completing the work. And that was our model, the model both of us had come from. And that is, I think what we've learned over time is not all engineers, and this is probably an obvious statement to anyone on the outside, but not all engineers are good at all of those things, and so what we've tried to do instead, we do have some really good seller doers, but we've also tried to meet people where they are and to help them just kind of play to their strengths. And I try to, it's one thing to help people stretch and develop and reach to new heights of, a personal best sort of thing. It's another thing to try to make them something they're not. And that's what we want to avoid. So to get back to your original question, about 10 years ago, we had a decision to make. We were losing, we had a semi-retired guy who was going to be fully retired. He had been helping us with our business development. He gave us about 6 months notice and said, I'm out. My wife is retiring. I'm going to be gone. Don't think I'm going to be hanging around. So we had to make a call, and the marketing side had always been under my purview, my part as a principal. But this is when we had to make a decision. Are we going to hire somebody else, or are you going to transition into this role full time? And so it took probably two or 3 years for me to transition away from the projects and focus fully on the marketing side. And that has been a journey. It's been a learning thing for me. I've had to let go of some absolutes, and, the engineering world and the design world is a very regimented, following equations and formulas and that sort of thing. And marketing, not so much. I mean, you can find equations and formulas, but there's also a lot of art to it. So it's been a journey, but one that has helped me recognize that I probably have a bigger passion for the people side of what we do than I do for the actual technical side of what we do. It's a more natural fit for me. And so yeah, it's been a fantastic journey, and I'm still learning. I mean, when I quit learning, that's the time, to do something different, right?
Yeah. Something you've pointed out that it is one of those key people strategies we focus on is fit to role. Do we have the right person in the right role for where they are at in their career journey? Because this does change, right? And so you mentioned, both for yourself is, hey, at the time it was the engineering piece, and then it was the seller doer, and it doesn't work for everyone in our organization. So we need to know, what are those natural behaviors that folks have to ensure that they are, engaged in the right work that's natural to them, so that they can do it at the highest level, and that does change for us throughout our career a little bit as well.
Absolutely. And we try not to lock people into that, or saying that. And it also applies to the marketing side of what we do. One of the first interactions I have with some of our newer staff is we have a session that we call Find Your Marketing Strength. And first I tell them the importance of the work that we do. I know we're going to dive into that some in our conversation, but so, I want them to understand the importance of what we're doing. We're not just, coming in and earning a paycheck, but they also want them to understand how they fit into our get work process, and how important it is, even if they're not out talking to clients every day or doing some of the things that I'm doing, how they fit in the market exposure that we have, producing excellent work product, even supporting internally within our team, morale and that sort of thing. We need everybody on board in this get work process, which for us comes down to building and maintaining these relationships that I talked about. And if we can't, how can we do that with our clients if we haven't already done that internally? We have to have a level of trust internally before we can expect people to go out and give their best to our clients.
Absolutely. So as you kind of talk about that get work process and, what some of those requirements are for your team, and you'd mentioned kind of why you left your firm early on in your career. And that really brings us to, how do you at Highfill, retain talent now? And what were the challenges that had you shift how you're doing that?
Sure. I think we have an excellent culture, and that gets reinforced to me from the folks that we work with, and from people on the outside looking in. I don't think we've always done a great job of communicating that, or communicating why that's important. So it's, again, we talked about not being bottom line focused early on, and we're not. It is profitability is important to us. Utilization is important to us. You're not going to find, if a consulting firm tells you we're not worried about your utilization, they're lying. Everyone does. It is for those who aren't familiar with that term, it's basically billable hours. That's your, the amount of time that we're able to collect revenue for of your time. So everyone in the consulting world monitors that because that's how we get paid.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to be our first concern. We're more interested in understanding what you're fit for our culture, where you can plug in, and how we can best play to your strengths, put you in a place where you can be the best version of yourself. And if you're doing that, then that's going to bode well for the company, for our clients, right on down the line.
Yeah, and this idea of communicating the culture. So often, we use some big words. We call it the employee value proposition, whatever you want to call it, right?
Sure.
But why do individuals want to come in and play within your organization? And so often, the longer we are with an organization, sometimes we forget about why things are so great, and that sometimes results in some of that turnover, that happens. So, and COVID tended to be a challenge for the majority of the clients that we worked with on either retaining talent or what that looked like, or we have a different playbook we have to play by, and we don't know what the rules are yet. So I'm curious, was there a distinction for you during COVID within the retention of your team?
Yes, absolutely. Prior to COVID, we had never turned over more than one or two positions in a year. And immediately post-COVID, from about mid 2022 to 2023, we turned over 12 positions, which was about 40% of our workforce at that time. And, the immediate, that's shocking, of course, to go through that when we're not accustomed to losing people. Some of those people got out of the industry altogether. As you know, there a lot of people doing soul searching post-COVID and decided, you know what, I think I'm just going to change up. And we had one person go full-time ministry and one person go into property management. I mean, these are some senior people, been with us 10 years and they're leaders in the company, and they just changed life directions. I mean, how are you going to deal with that? So that really hurt. And then a lot of the ones that we were losing, though, in that period were some younger employees that we had spent 24 months training. And now that institutional knowledge, that investment that we've been making to try to get them up to speed is out the door. So yeah, we had a real issue there. Now, we did manage to hire 14 people during that same time period. So that's good. We netted a gain, but on aggregate, the 14 that we hired were much less experienced than the 12 that we lost. So now we're in a training scramble and trying to get them up to speed. I mentioned how long it takes us to earn the trust of our clients because of the nature of the work that we do and the complexity and the cost involved. And it's very similar. Engineering graduates don't come out of engineering schools day one prepared to be a phenomenal consultant. They have tools. Engineering school teaches you how to solve problems and how to find resources to solve problems. And then it's up to us out in the world, in the working world, to help you apply that knowledge to solving specific problems for specific people and specific systems. So there's no such thing as a plug and play engineer. You're ready to roll right out of school. On the job training is requisite in what we do. Our fields are very, specialized and take some real specialized training to be there. So you're investing all of this effort into getting people up to speed, making them productive, helping them to be able to work more independently with no guarantee that they're going to stay. And that has been the post-COVID challenge for us, is figuring out how do we encourage the right people to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the consulting gig is very different than working at a large firm where you have very, very specific policy structures in place with layers versus being out on a project and you are that face. Yeah, so it's a very, very different. And we work with a lot of, engineering firms as well that are hiring consultants straight out of school. And so much of it is the leadership skills that you have to train within that.
Yeah, very, very true. Very true. You mentioned earlier, making sure you have the right people on the bus, and that the Collins idea of the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and then the right people in the right seat on the bus. And so
Exactly.
we've been very fortunate we're very selective in our hiring process. And so we don't typically end up with what I would consider to be wrong people on the bus, but we certainly have had some people that needed to change seats.
Yes.
And we had to acknowledge that. And that's one of the post-COVID realizations for us was we had some supervisors who needed some training, some leadership training, as you're mentioning, some communication training. Can think of one in particular, fantastic engineer, fantastic project manager, kind of an old school bootstrapper who, hey, suck it up and get it done, buttercup. This is
Yep.
the way, this is
Yep.
life. That's not resonating with folks coming out of college these days. So
No, it's not. And so sometimes we have to shift a little bit of the mindset. Like the work ethic, though, of those folks is incredible. So how do we take the work ethic? We just have to shift the methods a little bit.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think there's this misguiding feel that the younger generations are lazy or, entitled. And they don't have a lot of patience for their time being wasted or not understanding, what it is, what's the importance of what they're doing. They want to make sure they're making a difference. And I think at our core, aren't we all looking for that? And I don't think any of us is really looking to just, waste our time and earn a paycheck. We want to know that we're doing something that's worthwhile and that's making a difference. And that's what I'm finding with the younger generations. They're not at all lazy. They're actually, I wish I had some of their ingenuity and background. These digital natives that, they're not afraid to try new tools and put them to use. They're not as tied to old sacred ways, the status quo, the way it's always been done. They're more likely to go ahead and take a leap into a new way of doing something.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that presents some real creativity and efficiency that we didn't experience before.
Right. Because it's a completely different way of looking at it. I want to highlight something you just said, which was about culture. And, the generation that's currently coming in is very specific about what their personal values are. And when we can match organizational values to an individual's personal values, now we know that they're there for the right reasons. And that makes such a huge distinction in, hey, we may have hired somebody with the exact right education, the briefcase, they've got the critical thinking skills, they have all those, but if they're not aligned with the organizational cultural values or their personal values, now we have another mismatch within that. So as we started talking about turnover, we had talked with Camber Parker Bowden last week with YoPro, and I know you've done some great work with her and her team. Specifically, I believe you reached out to her when you were really looking at some of the turnover issues that you were having after COVID. So I'm curious, how did that work impact the organization? And that shift into, the retention that you have currently.
Yeah, yes, we are working with Camber and her team at YoPro, have been for a little more than a year now. I first met Camber at a water-related conference in upstate South Carolina and heard her talk about intergenerational communication. And she was specifically focused, more on at that time, understanding and more effectively communicating with younger generations. But now they're really recognizing there's a flip side to the coin. And so they're helping us with it. It's not just communicating with younger generations, it's communicating, we have all generations from Gen Z to boomers represented in our small company. So we need to know how to effectively communicate with all those generations. And they're certainly helping us do that. So they came in and did an initial assessment of us. And specifically, we had engaged them to help us with recruitment and retention of younger professionals in the engineering world. It's partly, I think, because of the Great Recession back from 2008, 2012. That's part of it. But there's this mid-range career engineer, project manager is really hard to find. The 12 to 15 years of experience, they're hard to find, and they're getting paid a lot of money elsewhere because people are trying to take care of them and not lose them. And we've just we were beating our head against the wall, trying to, along with all the other engineering firms, trying to find the same unicorns and hire them. And we've just said, we're going to have to find people with less experience that fit our culture and invest in the training. And that's what we've been doing. Primarily, not that we're not open to, if there are any unicorns listening and this sounds good to you, come on, give us a call.
Right. You and about 15 other firms, right?
Exactly.
And probably more than that in both of ours. Yes, absolutely. But it comes down to culture and that very specific of, is this going to be the right place for me to thrive? So I just want to pinpoint that. It's so good.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And so we had engaged YoProKnow to help us with recruitment and retention. They came in and did an initial assessment. And to my surprise, one of the things they wanted to focus on was our social media, which for us was an afterthought. It's, yeah, when you get a few minutes, throw this up on our Instagram or, it was never something we planned for. It was just sort of whenever we have a few minutes, if our marketing staff or we call them stage crew that's the moniker they came up with. And it's so fitting for how much they're involved in the success of what we do. And they're largely behind the scenes. It was a fitting name. And so, but yeah, so YPK came in and did this assessment and said, you really ought to think about being more deliberate about your social media. Well, we didn't know how to do that. So we hired them to help us do that. And for the past year or so, they've been helping us with that. And, I mean, I'll be candid. I don't know that anyone has come in and said, wow, your social media knocked my socks off. That's how I found you. And I wanted to come work with you. But we have had at least 3 of our newer hires say, we asked about social media and they said, yeah, when I was interested in the position, I checked you guys out and it reaffirmed for me that your culture looks like a place that I can thrive and grow. And that is huge for us. And so,
Yeah.
and so this, this turnover thing is back now to, we're back down to one or 2 per year for various reasons. We had a guy leave last year to go work overseas at an opportunity that we're not going to be able to offer him. I mean, those things are going to happen, but we're not losing anyone for a disconnect from what we say our culture is and what they're experiencing. We're making sure that those 2 things are in sync and that we're communicating that well. And that part is making a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That goes back to what is that employee value proposition? What's that culture that has folks look at it, that they see it as they're scrolling and go, wow, if there's ever a position there, I want to work there. And when the positions don't come up very often, but when they do, they're like, everything I've heard over the last 6 months or a year aligns with what's important to me. And that's that difference. So amazing. So shifting from kind of recruitment to an attraction to retaining talent, there's a journey that you've been through and your team has been through as you've looked at, hey, how do we coach our team? How do we coach multi-generations? And so I'm curious, how does your own self-awareness of your impact in the workplace and coaching play into supporting, the workforce that you're bringing in and the current one that you had?
I think that at this recognition, the work we do, we're in the water sector. So we're working with infrastructure that is providing safe drinking water, that is cleaning wastewater before it's returned to the environment. So our clients are the public utilities who are on the front lines doing this work. I mean, these folks are the unseen, unsung heroes in so many cases, and we're helping them do their job. And by doing that, we're saving lives. I mean, that's how many people get to say that we're saving more lives on a daily basis than the medical profession through prevention of waterborne disease.
Yeah.
And so I mean, that's a huge bonus for if you want to make a difference in other people's lives, to be able to do work in a field that does that that's huge. We weren't communicating that at all. And so, we've been more deliberate about saying that up front, making sure that people recognize how we fit in this prevention of waterborne disease effort. And then we also recognize that we need a place for people. We need mechanisms for people to give us feedback, to be candid. We're saying, you be you. We want to help you create the best version of yourself right here. We want you to come into Highfill and be yourself. And we want to help you be the best version of yourself in serving our clients. Do that. If we're not getting feedback, how are things going? We've revamped our employee evaluation. We're now doing that twice a year. Many of our supervisors have ongoing, maybe bi-weekly, one-to-one meetings with some of their staff who have requested that, so that we can make sure that we're on the same path and locked in together in lockstep. And we have a group called Highfill Headspace who are focused on, this is 5 or 6 individuals that changes about every year to 18 months. And these are folks that are focused on the well-being of the company and the culture and the morale what are we doing that we should stop doing? What are we not doing that we should be doing? What do we need to tweak? Those sorts of things. We have an anonymous suggestion box that if you don't want to take something to your supervisor or to a company principal, put it in the suggestion box, and it's truly anonymous. We don't know, who's doing that. We do wellness surveys. There are other opportunities. We're focused on employee recognition. We've been much more deliberate about recognizing accomplishments of our individuals, and not just, we're even deliberate now about recognizing it's your birthday, it's your work anniversary, hey, we're so happy that you're here. Just not letting that go unsaid. And that's not really a natural, in my history, at least, that's not a natural skill set for an engineering, a group of people. We're focused on facts and figures and that sort of thing. We're not focused on the human side. And we've had to, in a very deliberate way, become focused on the human side to make sure that we have that feedback loop and that we're retaining this talent that we're investing in and they're investing in us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And all of those things go into the culture, right? And that communication that's been a thread throughout our conversation today is how are we communicating the things that we're doing to bring it top line, but also listening in to maybe what we're not doing in order to continue to make those tweaks to make us an amazing place to work for, those that have the cultural alignment to our mission of the organization.
Absolutely.
So with that, what is fulfilling to you personally about supporting your team to grow into new roles as the firm has grown?
My personal mantra is be the best me I can be. And so, we talked a little bit about that we as a company are trying to do that with our people. And I think to any small extent that I can participate in that, in helping people achieve the best versions of themselves, that's personally satisfying to me, whether it's my own kids who are adults now, but still developing, aren't we all? If we're not developing, something's wrong. And so from my own kids to colleagues and business partners, whatever I can do to help them become the best version of themselves, then that's fulfilling for me. One of the things I learned a long time ago that was very freeing for me is when it comes to success in whatever way you want to measure it, it's not a finite pie. And so I can celebrate genuinely other people's success, even if it has no effect on my own success, because it takes nothing from me. And I am genuinely happy to see other people succeed. There's plenty of pie. We're creating pie every day. It's not a commodity that's in short supply. We're finding new ways to create valuable, keep calling it pie every day. And I'm happy to celebrate the success of others.
Amazing. And within that success of others, it is also kind of starting to create plans with and for them as you step towards retirement for them to step into those higher levels each time. So I'm curious, in the engineering world, there's a very specific credentialing pathway that has an impact on how folks can grow. And so I've got a two-pronged question for you. So one is, how is the setup of that credentialing kind of path impact retaining millennials? And how are you working within that so that you have enough pipelines so that you can step towards retirement and step out of the organization?
Yeah, great question. As soon as I figure all that out, I'll let you know.
we're going to patent that thing, and that's the only thing we're going to focus on, right?
That's right. That's my golden parachute. So for those who are not familiar, traditional engineering pathway to become licensed as a professional engineer, after you graduate from an accredited engineering program, you take what's called the Fundamentals of Engineering. It's an 8-hour exam that is grueling. And then you work at least 4 years under the tutelage of a professional engineer so that you can sit and take the Principles in Practice, another 8-hour exam, to be able to become licensed and the Principles in Practice exam is more specific to the field that you are working in, that you've been working in and that you want to go into and become licensed in. So then you can, passing all of that and that experience requirement, so now you're at least 4 years in and you're a licensed engineer. There are other pathways, but that's the shortest. pathway. So when you look at on the consulting side, you come into the workplace from school, you're providing basically engineering support hopefully you've already passed your fundamentals exam. So you're an engineering intern or an engineering training. For any engineers listening, engineering graduates listening, take the fundamentals exam and pass it as close to school as you can. Concepts in there, it's stuff that you're not going to use later. You got to get past it. So go ahead and take that as early as you can.
100% agree, right?
Yes.
Like, same when I took my SHRM certification for HR, like take that as soon as you get out of school, because there's things there that just you're going to forget about and are no longer in your area that you're focused on. And you're like, well, this is like structural, or this is something completely different. Well, yes, and you still need to know it.
Completely agree. Yeah. Any licensure like that, they get the fundamental one out of the way as soon as you can.
Yes.
But so in the consulting world, that looks like, maybe 4 years as engineering support, as an EI or an EIT, helping various project managers and project engineers, and then maybe serve another 2 to 4 years as a project engineer before you can move on into project senior engineering if you want to stay more on the technical side and less on the project management side. I mean, you do that math. We're in 6-8 years of really no significant promotion or change of title. That doesn't really resonate very well with the younger generations. I mean, that's a long time to feel like, even if you're getting more responsibility, your salary is increasing commensurate with those responsibilities, you're being taken care of, but your title's not changing, your position's not changing. Those things are not necessarily fulfilling, is what we have found for the younger generations. And so what we're trying to do, and this is an idea that it's not original to me. In fact, you know that Kimber has her own podcast, and the Great Retention with Kimber Parker. In one of her episodes, I heard this concept, and it's from a book called The Alliance.
So can I just name, Ray, being a true engineer that he is, I send over the questions and I get like a 7-page document back with all of the answers. I'm like, this is a first in 200 plus episodes. And wow. I love this. So we've got the engineering brain over here with the Traci fly by the seat of your pants, which is typically how I fly on these, right? So I just want to name, like, it takes all of us in how we work so differently to make amazing things happen. I just wanted to shout that out so you could see some of that in action. Thanks
for giving me that grace, Traci. I appreciate that. And I completely agree with you. It takes the yin and the yang to keep it interesting and make it worthwhile. So this book called The Alliance by Reid Hoffman and a couple of other guys really caught my attention. They mentioned the idea of tours of duty, and which is of course based on the military idea of a tour of duty. We're in the process of implementing this at our firm, and basically it is breaking down aspects of that, maybe 6 to 8 years into bite-size, maybe 2 to 3 year tours. And so what it boils down to is we're acknowledging with the employee, okay, you're coming on board. You like the culture. You like what you see here. We like what we see in you. We're going to go ahead and acknowledge you're unlikely to come in here and stay for 30 years. Let's say that up front. We know that we make a huge investment up front into getting you trained. With every year that you spend here, you become more valuable in the market to us and to our competitors. We understand that you're learning skills that are highly marketable. What we would like to do is let's agree to a finite period of time that's bite-sized, maybe 2 years, that we're going to get you from point A to point D. And this is our commitment to you, your commitment to the country. And it's not contractual. I mean, we're not going to sue you if things change, if you have to leave. We don't want to create employment contracts anyways. No. It's still at will employment, but it's our intention and your intention. And now we both feel good about, okay, this is doable. Now, at the end of this, here's where I'm going to be. And so as we approach the end of that tour, now we can transition to either another tour, hopefully for us, and that things are going well. We've got this next tour lined up. How does this look? Maybe we tweak it a little bit because you've discovered my streets lean more in this direction than that direction. So we tweak that tour to make sure it makes sense for you. And then we sign you up for the next tour. We proceed on in that manner. Or if you've decided, you know what, I don't think this is for me, then we help you transition out and we do our best to help you find placement, wherever that is. There's no hard feelings there. And we just recognize that we've both made an investment here and we're both at a better place because of it. So we're working on actually how that's going to shake out. We're in the developmental process, but that is what we're doing to try to really shore up that pipeline.
Absolutely. And these experiments, which I love to call them experiments because we don't know how they're going to turn out. Even the things we think we know how we're going to turn out don't necessarily always turn out that way. So the experiments allow us to tweak it as we go. So, as we kind of start to wrap up here, one of the things that, we are seeing so often is the diversity of our workforce and the impact of that diversity on those that we're serving, whether it's backgrounds, whether it is, race, ethnicity, sex, all of the things come in with very different mindsets and ideas. And how are you finding that diversity has an impact, especially in a multi-generational workforce?
Yeah, this may shock you, Tracy, to know that the engineering profession has not traditionally been rich in diversity.
Really? I mean, I would have never guessed. So many fields out there, right?
Yeah, true. That's very true. And
yes,
despite huge efforts from so many, but yeah, I appreciate this question. I grew up in a small town, rural North Carolina. We didn't really think in terms of diversity, but my parents did instill in me, the inherent value of each individual. And so that was a good place for me to start. And then as I have traveled and grown and matured and become exposed to, other cultures and other backgrounds, I've recognized that, the human needs of safety, shelter, love, well-being for ourselves and our families, those things are all very universal to all humans. And at the very baseline, that's what we're all trying to achieve. So if we can recognize that, then what's important we have in common. Now you have this richness of backgrounds and cultures and traditions that are different from your own that can make us stronger. I'll give you one quick anecdote, if you don't mind. I've just read Malcolm Gladwell's latest book, Revenge of the Tipping Point. And he makes a point in there about the scientists have discovered that all the cheetahs on the earth right now are more than likely from the same family unit, as if they're all, brothers and sisters, basically. Possibly even, he's taking a little liberty here, but possibly even from one pregnant female who survived an event that was otherwise extinction for the species. So they found this out by looking at genetics and finding out there's very little diversity in the genetics of cheetahs. And so what's happening is they've become very susceptible to disease. They're not reproducing well. I mean, it's created a monoculture in the cheetah population. And so the only way to make it stronger is to introduce different genetics. Mm-hmm. That's the only way to make it stronger. And that's, for me, that's a good analogy for the engineering world, for life in general. Trying to boil things down to a homogeneous existence is the wrong way. That's the way to extinction. That is not the way to thriving and vitality and life and achieving what we want to achieve. And so the richness of diversity is something that I'm very passionate about. And I think people that look like me in particular and you, but certainly straight white males have got to be the ones championing this along with our other friends. If folks who look like me are not out there saying that, then we've got a real problem.
Yeah, 100% agree. And how boring is it when all of our conversations are exactly the same, And there's something to be said about, let's just have a conversation and get really curious about what's underneath it. And that curiosity leads to so much innovation. And,
Yes.
It's pretty incredible. So my last two questions for you. What is a work bucket list that you have on your list for this year?
Well, let me see, a work bucket list for this year. We're in North and South Carolina, as I mentioned. I really, really we need 2 more offices in South Carolina. And so I really we need space in the upstate. We need space down in the low country. And if we could get one of those even closer to fruition this year, I'd be very happy. So that might be a boring bucket list, but that's my
Oh, that's not
engineering
boring.
bucket list.
Yeah.
Okay.
So open up 2 new locations. Incredible. And what's on your personal bucket list?
Man, I've got some great concerts lined up with my daughter this year, which is a personal point of pleasure for me, and watching Charlotte FC, our MLS club in North Carolina, with my son. So I'm going to say I would love to see Charlotte FC go to the MLS championship. And if that happens, I will make sure that I'm freeing up my schedule and going to see that.
Amazing. Amazing. And for your podcast cover, we may use the band picture. We have not decided yet. And so going back to a people strategy, asking that work bucket list question and that personal bucket list question is really what's important to you outside of work and in work, because guess what? It is the same power soup, right? And
Yeah.
so often it's like, all right, how do you tie those 2 things together? So how do you tie the going to the things with family and opening a new office together? And sometimes those are really fun conversations to have around the water cooler with folks at all levels of the organization, because we get to know them personally, along with what is that professional thing that may not be on your job description, but allows us to know what's important.
Yeah. Great.
Ray, do you have a last thought or something you want to highlight for our listeners as we close it out today?
We've covered a lot of territory, Tracy. I don't think I have anything to add. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and I appreciate the engaging conversation. I guess I'll highlight the difference in our styles probably comes out in this conversation. And I think, to your point, that's what a boring mess it would be if it's just staged questions and me coming up with staged answers, but us having, a conversation and kind of going down a rabbit hole here and there. I think it's indicative of why we need yin and yang.
Absolutely. And it's a form of diversity, right? It's a complete form of diversity of looking at and saying, if we had, we use predictive index at Elevated Talent, but we were all Mavericks, oh my gosh, nothing would ever get over the finish line, right? And yet, if we were all engineers, would we have these new ideas and these exciting things come up to shift things? I don't know. Probably not, right? And it's a little bit of the and both to move it forward. Thank you so much, Ray. And thank you to our listeners for listening in to this episode. I think that this is the longest episode we've ever recorded. So I will name that. And thank you so much to our listeners for your 5-star reviews and sharing this within your network. There is so much gold here on different people strategies that Ray has implemented, from talent pathway plans to employee value proposition to aligning personal values to core values. So with that, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening today. I'd love to connect with you. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn at Traci, Traci Austin, and at our website at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. If you'd love to learn more about our process, please reach out to us. And again, thank you so much for listening and sharing your feedback with us through a review. Have a fantastic day.